Good evening, welcome. I hope you've had a nice afternoon. You had, in the course of your afternoon experience, did you have a chance to play with this stuff at all, to any degree?
So my experience is when I think I should kind of play with it or look at it, it feels like I'm trying. Like
Okay.
I'm not just taking the experience and where I am. It's sort of for what it is. Really I almost always translate it into a doing, a trying.
Okay, but what is doing? When doing happens, what is that?
It's usually a reminder that this isn't enough, that I should be reaching for something else. Kind of my version of it. It's a negative reinforcement, kind of how it shows up here.
You know, a good way to interface with this, I mean, a very simple way that is much less of a doing is just beauty, or lusciousness, or amazingness, or even ugliness. You know, if you see something that's very repulsive, just the immediacy of that, you know, the vibrancy, the poignancy, the vitality of that flavor or beauty. You know, you see a sunset or just or a flower, anything whatsoever. It's beautiful. What is that? Why is, you know, how is that so palpable? How is that so present? And I mean, I think the simplest way to interface with this, so to speak, is just through texture. And texture conveys itself through quality. Experience is not black and white. It is not boring. You know, it has vibrancy. It has impact. It has startlement. You know, it has, and this comes as qualities of flavor. I mean, literally like flavor, like you take a bite of food and it explodes in your mouth as a quality. It may not be a particularly good quality, but it's there, it's a present, it's an actuality. And this, just that, is a doorway to amazingness. What is this? What is this presence? What is this? How can these qualities be present? And right there is mystery. Right there is you know, it's openness. And so, I mean, yesterday I said, in a profound sense, an easy way to approach this is just as hedonism, just enjoying the lusciousness of experience. You see something beautiful or something attractive or something with any kind of wow factor, and wow, you know, just drinking that in, it's transcendental. I mean, how can that happen? It doesn't make any sense. It's entirely irrational. You know, there's no explanation for experiential quality. There's no explanation for, you know, that something has this amazing qualities of vitality, of you know, of meaningfulness, of anything, any sort of a quality at all. So just really just looking around in your experience and finding something with just a little, and you know, even just the way a light sparkles or anything, you know, all of a sudden there's something there that is, you know, what is this? What is this? It's real. It's actual, and it's palpable. And what is that? What is that made of? You know, not of course that there's answers to these questions, but it's a way of being with the vitality of it. Which is a transcendental quality. Vitality is transcendental. Vitality makes no sense. Life force makes no sense, right? Energy makes no sense. It's not rational. It doesn't. You can't explain it. You can't, you know, figure it out. It's astounding, right? And just being with that as that is transformative. You know, maybe not as a huge thing, maybe just as a little, just an incremental thing, but that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be some huge be all and end all. You know, appreciating the astoundingness of experience is a cumulative transformation. It's a cumulative transformative engagement. just even just tiny little snippets. Would it be possible to raise these lights a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah, the outer ones here. I thought I had them up all the way, but it seems a little dim here to me.
Like being in a night club.
Yeah. That helps a bit.
Yeah, they're on the screen.
It's okay.
That's good.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
better.
I always will fall asleep.
Yes.
I hadn't really consciously put together what I might have carried into the afternoon from our talk, but I get fascinated with trees, especially with the wind moving them. And at dusk, it really gets great. And it seems so alive. And then there's the silhouettes of trees. So this is a good place for that. But, it's nice to be captured by beauty.
Sure.
Henry and I were walking up this mountain, and just a 2-hour walk, and just not talking. It was a lot. It was very steep and a lot of rocks and negotiates. You're basically just like the screen of view is like looking this way pretty well. And the one thing I noticed is I didn't know how I was doing that. And I mentioned to Henry later, it's like if I had to actually negotiate what footfall had to fall there to get that rock, it was so apparent that wasn't a concept. That the walking up that hill was not a concept. It wasn't being thought about. It didn't need any help. There's something about that pops.
Yeah. I mean, all functioning is essentially transcendental energy engagement. If you had to think how to do things, you'd never be able to do anything. Functioning is just walking or talking. How can you talk? How can you manipulate the muscles of your throat to make them do all of these very precise, micro movements and projecting sound and effortlessly, spontaneously, in real time? This can be negotiated. Anything we do well, we do irrationally. We do as direct energy engagement, and for that matter, anything we don't do well is likewise. And even thinking, which is typically imagined to be a rational, purposeful activity, isn't really. It happens spontaneously. And how do you think? There's no way you could think how to think, right? There's no way you could figure out how to think. How am I going to think this? It's just bang, it's there, it happens. And it is engaged with and as a real-time dance, as a real-time engagement.
There seems to be a lot of acclaiming that can happen right after that. Oh, look what I just did.
Sure, of course, of course.
Then what is claiming?
No, sure. That's getting to a fine point. That all this normalcy, that all this normal functioning and normal participation is what it actually is is completely astounding. And just noticing that fact, noticing that, this astounding, inconceivable condition is, it opens access to the vitality that it actually consists of.
It kind of brings up, we were talking about, people were talking about free will this morning a little bit. And it's so kind of funny because even at a conventional level, if I really think about it, like, okay, well, I can decide to turn my head this way, and and I'll decide to go eat breakfast now. But if I look at it throughout the day, probably I have maybe about 10 things that I really feels like, well, I can claim this, and the rest of it is just running, not on its own automatic. Yeah, and then of course even those 10 things are a little bit questionable too. But the authorship seems so prevalent that that's the main thing. That's the main show every day. When it's so it's very little bit, very minuscule, and even in conventional looking at it.
Peter, can you talk about daydreaming?
Sure. Daydreaming is an ever-present mode of experiencing, mode of experiencing. It's a subtle bandwidth. It is literally analogous to dreaming, only which is occurring all the time. If you look closely, you can discover that all the different dimensions or bandwidths of your experience are happening simultaneously all the time, even though different ones just seem to assume relative prevalence. Like, for example, in the waking state, the waking sensory experience is very dominant and very coherent. But the dream level, so to speak, of density of phenomena doesn't actually cease. And the deep sleep level doesn't actually cease, even though they recede in prevalence as the focus of attention, as the waking phenomena becomes more prevalent. And likewise, when you go to sleep at night, you'll notice the waking dimensions just sort of recede and get less relevant, and then the more amorphous mode of the sleep dimension becomes prevalent. But you can tune into these other modes because they're all occurring constantly. They're just not particularly in focus. They're not particularly in the forefront of attention. This is advanced meditators learn how to meditate not by doing something they're not doing, but you go to the portion of your experience which is doing that, which is like that. So meditation is very easy when you notice that you have this sort of a random access ability to be with your experience in these various bandwidths, even if they aren't naturally in the forefront, even if they aren't naturally in the spotlight. It's very easy. Just right now you can just go to the portion of you that's dreamlike, and right away you'll find a whole dream is happening, with perhaps amorphously or whatever. But there's always, and the energy is always happening in that kind of dimensionality or a density of experience, perhaps.
Kind of seems like, and I don't know if I'm just giving myself more permission, that I could go into daydreamy states more, like you're asking about, like doing an experiment this afternoon, where I went to the kind of the water thing over there and just was kind of daydreaming, I guess, looking at it, thinking about things going on, like a lot of stuff was going on, but I wasn't like grabbing hold of anything. It's what I do now instead of meditate.
Yeah, and it's very easy when you begin to notice that all of these different, when you begin to notice the arbitrariness of the focus of attention, it becomes very easy to let that focus drift or to even semi-deliberately go to these different other sort of modes or dimensionalities or textures or whatever. And there's something happening there. You can very easily go there because you're not actually locked in anywhere, even if there's a tendency for a certain range of dimensions to be more prominent. That doesn't actually cancel out the other dimensions. They're right there too, right here, and they're all accessible.
See, part of it is to learn how to access whatever one you.
Sure, let yourself, have random access, and just the notion that you can times the pump for doing it. I mean, the more you have a sense, oh, I'm awake now, so I'm stuck being awake, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, just a belief that that is actually true, but it's completely arbitrary. Because when you're awake, but there's thought happening, there's fantasy happening, there's different moods happening, there's reminiscence happening, there's all of these things that happen concurrently, even if they're relatively unconscious or relatively not in the forefront of experience.
It's like when you drive somewhere and somehow you're there and you can't remember how you got there.
Sure.
And then you get kind of scared, like, did I run any red lights? But maybe not.
Sure, exactly so. You were focusing on another dimension
Right.
at that time.
Focusing is goal-oriented, no?
Well, it may seem to be. We ordinarily, or it may be natural to think of it in those terms, but in actuality, experience always tends to generate a focus unconsciously. It's dancing around, and not always very consistently. You can dance around, you can be sitting looking at something, and all of a sudden some memory shows up, or some feeling or whatever. And I think we typically don't notice how dynamic the focus is and how essentially arbitrary or spontaneous it seems to be, unpredictable. But again, we can take advantage of this as a kind of a deliberateness, as a kind of an intentionality, right? But the extent to which we can do that or really control it or be deliberate with it is a little bit vague because some people have a more powerful concentration. Some people have a mind that can be very focused. Some people are a little more scattered just in their natural energy or something perhaps. But even those of us who are a little more obsessive and a little more able to look at something, in actuality the focus is always very dynamic. Even when we're with something very precisely and engagedly, very deliberately, it's dancing around. And within that dancing, it actually occasionally bounces way over here, and way over there, and way over here.
And it
So-
can get siphoned away.
I'm sorry?
It can get siphoned away.
I'm not sure I follow you.
The opposite of goal-oriented being
Yeah, sure.
drawn,
Sure. And I mean, in a way, focus of attention is the central mystery of identity, because I think how to put that? I think that a large part of mental activity, of sort of imagination, comes with constructing a kind of a coherence out of the dynamism of focus that isn't actually there. It's a fabricated coherence that's not actually there. Like, for example, if you look very carefully when you're looking at someone's face, typically you're actually sort of dancing around and seeing this and seeing that, and you look at one eye, look at another, depending. There's a dynamism there, but the intelligence sort of glosses over that and creates a pseudo coherence that seems to be very stable, even though there's an actual dynamism. And I think that this is an essential mechanism in the way identity is created, the identity of any entity, identity of anything. I think experience is actually relatively incoherent and consists of sort of lots of little snippets and flashes that don't have very much to do with each other at all, that come perhaps in a series or in a scatter, who knows what, you know. But again, the intelligence is very skilled at sort of creating a composite out of that seems to be coherent, seems to be stable, even though it's actually composed of a dynamism and an instability. I mean, exactly what that is, of course, can't really be said. It's not that it's literally exactly precisely like that, but something along those lines seems to be the case, as far as I can see. And taking advantage of the dynamism of focus is a big part of liberation, because discovering that the degree to which the apparent coherence of experience is a fabrication. In every sense. I mean, I'm trying to think of ways to enumerate that, but I don't even know if it's necessary from my perspective.
It's hard to make logic out of anything. Like if you think something's a certain way and then you just kind of see how everything is so scattered.
Sure.
It just.
I mean, in a sense, it's easy to make logic out of things, but it's kind of bootstrapped into existence. It's fabricated. In the same way, coherence is a similar thing, because our experience is actually absolutely inconsistent. Every instant, you experience something that you've never experienced before and will never experience again. And in the next instant, it's different in perhaps largely subtle, but absolutely complete ways. And yet all of this astounding newness and uniqueness and incoherence and difference is kind of effortlessly glossed over by the intelligence. And the intelligence is able to see things as more or less stable, more or less the same, not much is happening.
That's what I mean if I think of something that's coming up that like I'm kind of nervous about or whatever, and I just remember how scattered everything, how it's not really that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in my experience, the actuality of incoherence is very, very powerful, very useful fact. And it undermines the false sense of stasis, of consistency, of that any kind of stuckness, that any kind of locked into anything that can be well, it can be anything, really. Anything that can be anything,
Right.
is essentially canceled out by the actuality of the astounding dynamism and incoherence that experience consists of. But the power of intelligence, I mean, I just talk about it as being the inherent intelligence, because it is intrinsically what this is this astoundingly powerful intelligence that has the effortless ability to be with all of this astounding dynamism and uniqueness of patterns in real time, of experiential patterns, and effortlessly turn that into a narrative, turn that into a coherence that seems to make sense and seems to have a past and future and seems to have, all of this, I mean, it's analogous perhaps to a movie where there's just these flickers of unique frames that have essentially nothing to do with each other. And yet the perception takes that and turns it into a smooth continuity with no gaps and no jumps and, I think for me, a lot of noticing is really noticing this very point, the point of the astounding dynamism and uniqueness of experience in real time, the way exactly what you experience in the instant is just that, and it's already something else in the next instant. You know, the focus shifts, the quality shift, you know, your head moves, whatever. All of a sudden, everything's different. And it never comes back, it never repeats. You know, so there's these little flashes, instantaneous flashes with no duration of absolute uniqueness that come and go, never to be seen again. You know, and not just as vignettes in the instant, but the separate components within each instant are also that. You know, the exact shade of color that something is over here, the exact flash of light that something is over here, the exact sound that something is in this moment. You know, they're all just these instantaneous flashes that are gone, and they've morphed into something else or completely disappeared or whatever. So there's this absolute inconsistency, this absolute incoherence that the intelligence can yet be with as an absolute or an essential coherence and this amazing tapestry of cause and effect and entities and objects and conditions and, you know, it's a lot, you know, it's a lot like, as simplistically put, it's a lot like constellations in the sky. You look in the sky and there's just these little dots of light. There's no connection at all. There's no pattern at all, basically. But then the intelligence can look at that and, oh, there's the Big Dipper. You know, there's Orion, there's this, because it effortlessly connects the dots when there's no actual connection. You know, and noticing the way this happens with experience in real time is very powerful in showing what this actually is as contrasted with what we're used to seeing it as being so concretized and stable and certainly a certain way.
Can also feel real schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because there's all these modes, there's all these perspectives that don't necessarily, there's all these interpretations, essentially, interpretive frameworks that don't have necessarily anything to do with each other at all, that are all can be seen, that the same pattern of data can be seen as this, that, and the other, completely disconnectedly, and it's up for grabs what's what. They can even coexist and be mutually contradictory and so on and so forth. Yeah, sure.
What's an example of that? What do you mean?
You know, you can be in a situation and have simultaneous, very different takes on it. You can feel like, you know, you can feel, I don't know, I can't think of it. I'm trying to think of a narrative, a way of putting that, but you're not sure what's going on, but you can have several different, pretty divergent hypotheses running in your imagination. You know, the person I'm talking to seems to like me, but I'm not sure they do, and this and that, and so there's all these sort of simultaneous takes on what might be going on that don't necessarily gel into a coherent whole, and none of them are particularly certain, but they're all viable hypotheses and interpretations. I mean, basically, we never know for sure what's going on. The intelligence is very skilled at denying that and cobbling something together that seems to be its dominant take on what's going on.
Well, like if I walk into a restaurant,
Sure.
and I order, and I eat, and I leave.
Sure.
That seems pretty coherent to me.
Well, the more generally you put it, the more coherent it's going to be. But in that instant of walking in the restaurant, what are you seeing? You know, what are your interpretation of what's happening in that instant? You know, do you like it? Do you not like it? Do the people who are seeing you like you? Do they not like you? I mean, just everything, just all the flashes, the instant flashes of possibility of what's actually happening, isn't necessarily very coherent. And there's a whole lot of, you know, and this sort of goes along, and again, by and large, this is not an issue because we skip over that. Typically, we don't even pay attention to it or aren't even aware of it. And we're with our dominant narrative as the interpretation of what is happening. That is usually pretty generalized and sort of bulldozes through all the noise.
So you're saying it's like there's a lot of other stuff going on.
Yeah.
Other than that, yeah.
Yeah, and typically we don't notice it because again, the intelligence is so powerful at being able to construct a pseudo-coherence, being able to construct a kind of a narrative about what's happening. But in actual fact, in the moment, it's always uncertain. You know, it's always a fork. There's always many forks in the road of what might be happening, and the next instant is the same. More forks and more forks, and every instant you're never sure exactly what's happening. But again, this isn't generally an issue for most people because we have this we're very skilled at having a narrative that is our take on what is going on here that we then, approach things with. But again, and the point isn't that any of that's an issue or a problem. The point is to notice that the way in which this coherent narrative is a construction, it's a fabrication out of a lot of disparate elements that aren't particularly coherent.
That is sort of true of focus and delusion both too. Apparent focus, I mean, depending on how focused I am on an idea, and I can avoid saying many of those other details that go on.
Sure.
Which is sort of part of the delusion that we live in, is believing we know what something is or what something isn't.
Sure.
Yeah, anyone who's sort of lived with or knows someone that is, sort of could be certifiably have mental problems, sooner or later discovers, sort of how that coherence can become totally delusional.
Sure.
Totally
sure.
maddening.
Yeah.
And, there's no coincidences in those people's lives.
Sure.
They're stringing together this,
Yeah. And
this incredible tale, and my sister was like that for a while, and that was one of my totally real awakenings, was realizing that I do that too.
Yeah. Well, this is
not to that sense.
right. This is the point. Is that in the extreme case of people who are obviously what we would classify as unbalanced, it's really obvious that this is happening.
Yeah.
But everyone's doing the same thing continually, and it's just as essentially absurd and artificial and contrived for a normal, healthy psyche, relatively, as it is for someone that's marginal.
But that also on the other opposite side was, yes, I mean, we're sort of basically semi-healthy. We are noticing all the little things all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, that there is something really more than just walking into that,
Sure.
restaurant.
Yeah, sure.
And
And typically, we are very skilled at being insensitive to that because it's comfortable. It's easy to function with a kind of a insensitivity, a kind of a high threshold of sensitivity, just because it's such an overload to have all of this going on all the time. But then, sometimes if you're in a funny mood or you're a little high or something, if people that experiment with drugs and altered states and all that, you could notice all of a sudden, you're in a situation and it's not particularly coherent. There's all of these, what's going on here? And which is kind of fun in a way. I mean, that's a lot of the reason why people do get high. But again, this is not a special case. It's just bringing to the forefront something that is always the case. And you can do the same easily, without chemical intervention, just by noticing that fact, sort of being a little more sensitive to the subtleties of your real-time experience. There's lots of ways to do this. You've all heard a lot of the examples that I give. You can look at your face in the mirror. Spend just for 5 minutes, just sit and look in the mirror, and just look at what you see, and you'll be amazed at the dancing that occurs. I mean, you're just looking at your face and nothing's changing essentially, and yet it's like, your face will look like this and look like that and look like the other. It doesn't actually settle down. The longer you look, the stranger it gets and the broader the range of what it seems to be. Or, more impersonally, you can, you've all heard me talk about this. You look at a blank wall or a clear blue sky and just sit and gaze at it steadily for 5 or 10 minutes. And what is ordinarily there's just a wall and it's very stable and it's just sitting there. You'll notice that it's just dancing around and it's like a light show. And but the experience of it actually is. Experience is this amazing dynamism and flickering and dancing and instability that the intelligence is highly skilled at smoothing out into a stability and a coherence and a lack of event. It averages all of this incredible noise and turns it into a signal. It's perhaps analogous to reading, when you look at these words on a page and there's all these words and all these images and different light and all that. But, the intelligence just collapses that down to, this word and that word and this word, and you have a sentence. And all of a sudden, a real complexity of sensory information is sort of dumped down to just a real simple coherence. It's just there. And, this happens effortlessly. The intelligence is so powerful at being able to do this. And of course, we're very familiar with this.
This gets back to what Nan was saying when you were talking to her about beauty or ugliness. Is that I notice when I'm in the general mode, like, well, I'm doing this now, I completely gloss over and miss. There's so many subtle, beautiful things when you pay attention. But you sort of think, it's this way, and so I don't need to look anymore. It's easy not to look.
Yeah. I mean, what I call this yoga is essentially sensitivity training. It's training yourself to be sensitive to what experience actually is in the instant, and discovering this amazing dynamism, this amazing vitality and liveliness and incoherence, which turns out, ordinarily the conscious mind is in terror of that. The conscious mind wants things to be simple and make sense, But in actuality, the discovery that nothing does make sense and nothing is simple is very liberating. Because making sense of things is actually a lot of work. When you get, nothing makes sense, it's all a big gobbledygook, no one knows what's going on. That's a big load off,
But it is, for me, it's a terrifying, I sense a terror.
Yeah, well, this is very typical.
The idea that it's antithetical to everything that's happened since I was 18 months old.
Right, exactly so.
Just, what?
We live in dread, and a lot of this dread is probably infantile, We're these infants and we're just like this, and our parents are, essentially and perhaps benignly trying to brainwash us and giving us encouragement for all this interpretation, and with subtle censorship, subtle recrimination for not, this is, you say, "Oh, Mama," and the mom goes, "Oh, wonderful, yeah, I love you," and you're going, "Da da da," and Mom's going, "This is boring," and so there's a kind of it's just a simple, Pavlovian conditioning of, gosh, I'm getting the reward if I manufacture some coherence that gets strokes from consensus reality, as opposed to just the inherent condition of just, what the fuck, But again, wherever it comes from, it's certainly, psychologically, the psyche, the normal psyche, really feels very insecure if it can't get a handle on things. You want to have a sense of what's going on and where you are and what's happening, and that feels like safety. But it's a very tricky thing, because in actuality, the safety that the psyche, that the personality, the psychology is so addicted to is actually the cause of all our problems, because it's imaginary. And we all know this. We know we're fabricating this safety, and that's the basis for the dread, the horror of life. The sense of, you get to bed and you're so glad, like, got through another day, thank God. Because you're faking it. Everyone knows they're faking it. And of course, we take a lot of solace because we think we're supposed to be doing it. And so it feels very comforting, and we're very threatened when we feel we're unable to fake it. But still in all, at bottom, we know we're faking it. And that's very, that's a fundamental problem there.
But you're saying it's not a fundamental problem.
Well, it's not actually a fundamental problem, but it seems to be. To the personality that feels such an urgency to fabricate some togetherness in the face of the dreaded secret knowledge that,
You don't know what the fuck's going on.
yeah. I have to at least put on a show that I have it together, even though I know at heart I don't have a clue. And that's an essential, very deep-seated terror there. Insecurity. I mean, it's the basic insecurity of the persona of the psychological self is this this certainty, this known fact that it's all a sham. No matter how skilled one is at being somebody, you're not really that, or at least that you're not sure you're really that. Right. Whatever, somehow it's all bottomless, it's a fundamental tension in the psyche, and that tension is felt.
I'm kind of back where you talked about like focus of attention and identity formation, and like how when you're with someone else and you walk in and you get, you put the data together in a certain way and you say, God, that person was an asshole. And they say, oh, I thought they were really charming. And you start going into this like, how did I formulate that? And I'm a bad person for formulating, it's like, and then you have to kind of deconstruct, reconstruct, and
Sure,
it is like exhausting.
Yeah, it's a lot of work,
Right.
And again, the psyche feels an urgency to do so, and feels a kind of a satisfaction for being able to do so successfully.
Right.
But at bottom, it's always it's never really a total satisfaction. It's always like oh, thank God I pulled that one off. I faked my way through that one.
Well, and I think that, what you're talking about, like, the subtle reinforcement starts so early. And then whenever you're kind of with anybody that especially you have any kind of emotional resonance with, it's like they can, you can kind of go back into a trance of trying to formulate yourself in a way that person is.
Yeah, sure.
If that makes any sense. I mean, it's interesting because we're doing it so fast and so unconsciously.
Yeah, it's completely automatic, and we aren't even aware that it's happening. But at root, there's a fundamental tension. There's a fundamental anxiety about all of this, and especially there's a lot of effort being exerted. It's a lot of work to turn incoherence into a pseudo-coherence, and in liberation, that effort is completely gone because there's no coherence whatsoever, and that's not a problem. That's actually delightful. It's wonderful. Because you're freed of having to do that. You're free of the need to do that, and so you're free of the anxiety of failing to do that.
It's so interesting. We've said these in meetings before that's not enlightenment isn't some sort of understanding. It's actually incoherent. It's actually incoherence when you arrive there, and it's almost the same thing when you're saying when you see through the generalities and really see what's going on, that's liberating, and it's actually not liberation. It's liberating. It's just there's no like place. It's just like continues. It's ongoing.
Yeah, and that is there is no liberation. Liberation would be some coherence. That would be liberation. Liberation is the non-existence of liberation. I mean, it's kind of a fun, it's amusing to put it that way, but it's true. It's really true. This whole fundamental issue of taking all of this patterning and pulling it and sort of wrenching it into, basically forcing it through a very selective denial into coherence, into some degree of a coherent narrative. And it's, it's a contrivance, it's artificial. And seeing that that is the case is very interesting. Because of course, typically we do it unconsciously, we don't even know we're doing it. We just think that is the world is what I think it is. But of course, that's not the case, Different. And look at political parties, look at religion, religious fanaticism, look at all these people that see the world so radically different than each other, and they all insist that, no, this is how things are. They are like this, how come you can't see it? And more fundamentally, seeing the world anyway at all is exactly the same thing. Even having a sort of a very bland, innocuous, not particularly interesting, middle-of-the-road normalcy is a complete cultist fanaticism of creation, in the face of the actual information, the actual raw data, which is essentially, well, it's not totally incoherent, but its degree of ordering is very strange and very nonlinear relative to anything that can be turned into a narrative or interpretation.
Does preference and opinion even show up in that field of tapping into the, there is no black and white or absolute?
Well, it's very interesting. This is very, you're getting into the nature of karma, the nature of patterning. And it's very paradoxical. And of course, as with all actuality, you can never get to the bottom of, you can never actually answer that question definitively. But it's a very interesting question to look at, because patterns are what they are, even if they don't resolve into a coherence of actually being any particular thing. Still, they are what they are. You are you. You are not you. The pattern that you are, the meta pattern that you are, is not the meta pattern that you are. They're different. They have different proclivities, different talents, different strengths, different weaknesses, different orientations, which implies a whole different functionality of preferences and motivations and so on and so forth. And this is true, of course, of all, apparent entities, all patternings that seem to have some degree of coherence as a functional entity, which is, of course, what karma is made of. In simplistic terms, your karma is to be what you are, which is to be, in every aspect, the flavors that you tend to consist of or manifest as or whatever, right? Who knows? You can't really pin that down. And that is what it is. And you are you, and you are demonstrably and obviously different than any other pattern you can look at. And yet, if you go looking at the pattern that you are, so who are you? What are you? What is your pattern? There's no answer. It's just diving into a bottomless universe of open-endedness. And yet, paradoxically, it is exactly the way it is. You are exactly what you are, even if that exactly is an inexactness. It's irrational. It doesn't make sense. You can't wrap your head around it. So it's very strange. Everything is exactly what it is, and nothing is anything in particular. And that sounds like a complete contradiction, but it's true. And that is true is a great revelation. To see the way in which that's true. It gets down to, something like the particle wave duality or whatever. It's all an instance of the same thing. The instance of pattern versus unpatterned, the instance of a narrative versus incoherence. All of this fundamental paradox. And it's not like it's not that, it's this, it's not this, it's that. It doesn't ever settle down. You're always in this eternal fork in the road where it is very specifically what it is, and at the same time it's not anything in particular. And you're always just continually at this juncture And it never actually settles down into actually being one or the other.
I have a question about, in regards to that, since all patterns are different, all people have our own pattern. There's something that floats around some of the neo-Vedic circles where they say, well, it's all different, it's all very different, but the subjectivity in each is exactly the same. It's like the clarity that all that stuff shows up in is exactly the same.
Sure.
Is that, I'm not sure if that's, how would you know that? Or how would, it seems like an extrapolation to me.
Well, you can say it's an extrapolation and all that. I would say, sure, I have no problem with that, but it's meaningless because you can't actually isolate or separate out the clarity from the difference. It's not like the clarity sitting over here being clear, being the same, and the difference is over here sitting over here being different, and there's a gap between the two. You go looking for the clarity and you don't actually find it. And yet, it's perfectly obvious. You go looking for the specifics and the difference, and you can't actually find that, and yet it's obvious. It's like looking for subjectivity and objectivity. Subjectivity is completely obvious and intuitive, and objectivity is completely obvious and intuitive. Subjectivity is very clear, pure, open, untainted, constant, unvarying. Objectivity is completely dynamic, unstable, and so on and so forth. It's all just, that's intuitively completely obvious, and you go looking for this subjectivity that is so clear and pure and unchanging, and you don't find anything. In fact, all you find is the objectivity. And if you're looking for the objectivity, all you find is the subjectivity. So, it's, the point is the weirdness of it, the non-linearity of it. I like this notion transcendental. It transcends being any particular way. It transcends being, sure, the clarity is the same and the specifics are different, but it transcends actually being that. It's weirder than that. It's perfectly fine to assert that, and that may be a valuable perspective, but it's not a final truth. The final truth is that which is all of that.
So you sort of saying, Peter, that actually the narrative is part of the incoherence?
Of course.
Rather than, often I feel like I have to move from one to the other. It's more transcendental than that. Incoherence isn't actually incoherence. Right.
And the coherent narrative isn't actually a coherent narrative. It seems to be that, and they seem to be sort of diametrically opposed, but neither of those is actually that. They're both something else which is absolutely inconceivable.
In other words, walking into the restaurant, ordering the meal and leaving is a completely uncoherent thing from every instant to the next, but you can actually walk in and get the meal.
Yeah, and there's no restaurant, no entering and no leaving.
Right.
But you can still go into the restaurant and order and leave. It's weirder than weird, And no portion of a way that it can seem to be is negated.
Right.
I actually had a moment like that today when I was in a store, and then I had this interpretation of the whole experience, and then I saw that it was not in fact true, and it was just sort of one of those moments of like everything colliding.
Like always.
I sense an appropriation. If there's an appropriation of, we talk about sense and making sense of something, of the cohesive, and then it is as it is, but as soon as there's an appropriation of what it is, that's the beginning of despair in a way. The sense that somehow the letting the sense go allows it to be what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as there's a sensing of it, a sense of compartmentalizing of it, it falls apart very soon.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
This notion that this thing can somehow govern all of this.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
that's where there's a hiccup.
Yeah.
And of course, whatever time is, but it comes to 55 and I realize there's a hiccup.
And you were talking about that anxiety. Part of that anxiety, it seems to me, is that some part of us imagines that if we were to, free fall, swan dive into that incoherence and just let all the instant chaos be what it is, that the functionality would cease. It would, but it's actually counterintuitive. That's not true. It's actually the opposite.
It's actually the opposite. Yes, the more you let go of needing to be with things in any simple or linear or coherent way, the more you have random access to inspired participation and functioning that doesn't need to make sense.
Yeah.
It like gives you get to break your own rules, which actually kind of frees up a nice efficiency of functioning because you don't need to go through process. You don't need to follow any rules. You can just be random, which turns out to be a very effective way to function relatively.
Yeah, but so counterintuitive the way we think.
Yeah.
Function.
Well, we think we have to have it together to function because we think functioning is a deliberate act, whereas functioning is a crazy, chaotic surfing of spontaneity. In actuality, it always has been. Anyone that's good at anything knows this. If you're a good skier or you're a good musician or you're good at anything, when you're doing that, you're in the zone. You're just surfing it. You're just surfing this energy. You're not sitting back planning it and thinking of it. You're dancing with it in real time, and it's not rational. It makes no sense. You can't say what you're doing. And the more you let go, the better you are. The more you can be on that edge.
And it takes, in any craft, it takes years because you come into it when you're young, it's the opposite again. It's like, I work hard at this.
And again, when you start getting really good, it turns out to be you learn to unlearn everything you learned. You learn to, I learned all these rules of how to do it. Now I let go of the rules and break them, and all of a sudden you can do it well. And yet, paradoxically, having gone through that arc seems to be productive.
Yes,
So.
yeah.
I mean, spirituality may be that, may be the whole arc of falling into ignorance, and then seeing through that. Maybe even though it's a seeming zero-sum game, why couldn't you just have stayed where you were at the beginning and not fall into ignorance? And yet maybe there's something happens in that metabolism, in that arc, that is actually, does something or whatever, right? This stuff is, this brand of spirituality is for mature people. It's because there's nothing to hang on to. There's no formula. There's no particular process. It's essentially a scam. There's absolutely nothing here and no way to do it. And that is what you do, which is incredibly productive of nothing. And yet, so to be with that takes a certain sophistication or subtlety or maturity or insanity or who knows what, gullibility perhaps. I mean, so much spirituality rests on process. Oh, you have to do this to achieve this, but it's all bullshit. Nothing is achieved, It's all a pretense. And letting go of that, when you have absolutely no pretense, what do you have? I don't know. And this is the question. This is the cutting edge. When you have no process, when it's just this, doing what it always does, when it's just life, what is that? how does that happen? What's up with that? You know, how can you maximize that, or is that even irrelevant? You know, and so it's just being with this loosely, genuinely, spontaneously, and having fun with it, tripping on it. You know, it's a fun art form. You know, it's just being you.
Here, I'm finding as I sit and listen,
Mhm.
I kind of purposely don't listen with my sort of rational thinking, analytical mind. I just sit and kind of, let it roll over me and I take it in, supposedly. But what I'm finding this time in sitting and listening, it's like I can't hold on to anything.
No.
I mean, if you asked me 2 seconds after you stopped talking about something, what you were talking about, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
I don't know what I'm talking about while I talk about it.
That's scary.
There's just a real distinct sense of I can't really get my hands into anything.
You're so lucky.
It's just like,
Really?
He's hanging on to every
I
syllable.
paid the same money you did. How come I can't do that?
Give her a key.
I think it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, that's it. That's the point.
No idea.
Yeah, that's the point. It's to really be with that, and yet here it is. You know?
I mean, in that way, it is like a creative activity. You know, like if you're dancing, for example, you just do it, and then you don't think about what you're doing.
True. Or maybe you do think about it, but you still just do it. You know?
And you trip.
Yeah, maybe you trip, you know?
And the good choreographer always ends up telling the dancer, look, you know that, you got the line right, everything's perfect. Just let the dance you now. Just dance the fucking thing. All the time. Same with orchestras, instrument players, directors to actors.
Sure.
Get out of your way, let the scene do its
Yeah.
thing, please.
The mind fuck about all this is that, it's that the dance is going on right now. I always think, I'm going to get some information. I can take it out there and use it when I'm dancing and skiing. But actually, it's like,
This is it. Yeah, it's real time. This is it. This is not a rehearsal. This is the yoga of radiant presence. Just this. What is it? I don't know. But this is it. I mean, it's just the ultimate koan. You know, what is this that's happening here? You know, and there's no answer, and yet just continually, the question is just continually being addressed. You know, what is this that's happening?
You know, it's like what Dan said, it's like, I mean, there's so many times that I'll get into that space, and then I actually am absorbing something.
Yeah.
You know?
It's not nothing.
It's not nothing. I am actually absorbing. It might come up in a dream, or somebody might ask me a question, I'll say, oh yeah, it was blah, blah, but what my experience was that I was all spaced out and daydreaming.
Yeah.
And are
confused.
Yeah.
Confused, in a stupor.
Right,
bewildered.
And then it's like, oh, I actually know something, or I know what I need to know out of that.
No, this is the astounding fact. Spirituality is absolutely nothing in particular, and yet it's real, it's actual, it's palpable, it works, even though there isn't an it that works.
Right. But it's like there's this ease that comes when, as a young person, it was like I had a hold on to information. That was like how I got ahead in the world, and yet so much of what I did even then was I just did it. I mean, in medicine, you learn all these facts, but then it's like you get with a patient and you're just doing something intuitively that just erupts out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
But learning to trust that's hard.
Sure.
Because intuition's kind of denigrated in the scientific world.
No, yeah, sure. In modern culture in general, playing by the rules is really put on an altar.
Right.
And just saying fuck it and going for it it's kind of glorified in pop culture, but in establishment it's kind of whoa, AMA doesn't like that at all.
Well, I mean, then you can't sell things if you like, if people can just do it all higgly-piggly because they figured it out themselves,
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of it, I
No,
think.
for sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's all about money, isn't it?
No
Cultural.
psychiatrist left behind.
You probably already answered this, but because music was in your life kind of before and after, could you just talk a little bit, wax a little bit about how that relationship felt between you and that instrument, and you and the love of playing, and you and that art form before and then after?
Oh, I mean, it's sort of in terms of realization and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
It's not fundamentally different, but there's a looseness and an ease and a lack of goal orientation.
Did your love for it stay the same, your passion for it?
Yes, but it's less coherent. It's there when it's there, when it's not there, it's not. Whereas before I was a musician.
Yeah.
I was very self-identified. I'm a musician. Hi, I'm Peter, I'm a musician. Now I don't know what I am, here I am. And sometimes I'm a musician when I'm being a musician, and when I'm not, I'm not. And there's no neediness about it. And sometimes it's there and it flows and cool, and sometimes it's not there at all, and it's just nothing.
Like I feel that I'm an actor slipping away, and that's scary.
Yeah, sure. But that doesn't, but you'll find that's not the loss of your skill or your craft necessarily. Yeah, I mean, I think I am certainly a better musician than I ever was, but I'm much looser about it in every way. There's a spontaneity and an ease with it and a lack of identification with it. And there's a lack of need. I don't need to be a musician. I happen to be one sometimes, and it's a great joy when it happens. But it's cool. It's easy come, easy go kind of thing. If I never played another note of music again, that would be okay.
Yeah. And that's fuck, man.
Scary.
I'm looking at the I'm cracking, I could work at Kentucky. Because just the mojo, it's like trying to find my car key.
Well, you're an actor. You're an actor. You've always got waiting on tables in the back of your mind, don't you? I mean, come on. Be honest. Would you like fries with that, sir?
Practice saying that.
Fortunately, for 30 years, I've never had to take another.
Yeah, well, hey, you're lucky.
And so, but now it's more like that, not being able to locate the fun of it.
But that's not necessarily a losing.
Right.
Loosening up with it is not necessarily a loss, and it may turn out, in fact, to be a gain.
Right.
Well, I mean, who knows? Maybe not. Maybe it is a loss. but just because it feels different.
But the point is, if it was a loss in effect of not being interested anymore, you wouldn't feel it as a loss.
No, of course, for sure.
It would be the next, whatever the next thing it is you
Yeah.
are moved to do.
It's more just disconcerting. It's more like I'm building
Now.
little prayer scrolls for myself. When I go back to work, these are the things that I'm going to light the fire with.
Yeah.
And I never had to do that.
No, but this is a good point you raise in a more general sense. That the progress of unfoldment, when it begins to really kick into gear, is continually unsettling, because you're always in fresh territory. It's like, I'm not used to doing things this way. It's not your normal modes aren't really there anymore, and you don't really go there, and that's sort of, well, so what's happening here? What's going on? And at first it can be a little startling, a little unsettling, a little like, hey, can I trust this? It's a little iffy, am I just losing it? But again, as the kind of the transition spontaneously occurs, there gets to be a reorientation and a comfort in spontaneity, a comfort in that, and a trust, it proves itself to be trustworthy and reliable in the way that it is, in its genuineness and its vitality, and you'll actually find your functionality really just popping when it does. I mean, you know,
Ease.
it's like, it's moving into not relying on formula, but in spades. I mean, with any kind of mastery or skillfulness, that happens anyway, like we were talking about when you begin to master a craft or a skill. But then with spiritual unfoldment, that continues onwards with a vengeance. You know, formula and structure and all of that and predictability and everything just completely falls away.
Yeah, it's like even just the art form by itself is like a critical threshold of information is reached, and then freedom happens. You know, whatever that looks like. But it's this critical threshold of information gathering and coalescing that when that starts to get lugubrious and kind of like you know, free fall, you know, chaos, it doesn't feel.
But this is another point. We're used to thinking of that as happening historically and cumulatively over years. But when spiritual unfoldment begins to kick in, all of that happens in real time. The information gathering is right here, right now. The hitting the threshold is right here, right now, and the taking off from that is right here, right now. And so that sort of real time proves itself, that real time functioning without needing to sort of have the safety net of historical development behind you. It proves itself as trustworthy and as vital. And it's perhaps superior functionally to sort of, again, relying on the sort of the safety net of, well, gosh, I've been doing this a long time. I'm pretty good at it by now.
But even the safety net experience is really just reality bootstrapping it in, you know.
Exactly, it's a fabrication.
It's just that we believe it's real.
Yeah, sure, it's not actually like that. It never was like that. Even when it was like that, it wasn't really like that. And so this is just a kind of a reality check of, well, was it ever that? Even when it was that, was it ever that?
The whole idea of history and story and, you know, cumulative experience and all of these things are all just aspects of delusion, really.
Yes, exactly so. Well put.
And then there's this, if you're not really efforting or suffering or, you know, that somehow you won't achieve anything. You know, that's like, so, I mean, it's so part of like the American culture. And,
Yeah, you know, Calvinism.
Right.
You have to sweat bullets to get anywhere.
So if it's just like, if you just say,
No pain, no
today I
gain.
like to act, you know, in your case, you know, it's like, oh, look, and here's something I'll try out for, versus like, I have to really, you know, have this energy to go forward. You know, I mean, I have it in all kinds of things.
Sure.
Still like, oh, can I just like go and have fun in the yoga class? Now I have to like do these hard classes and really effort through it. It's like, no, that's no fun, you know, but it's hard to let go of like that and like go with the part of me that likes, you know, I've been just really noticing the laziness that has been coming out since I've been hanging out with you, and it's great. I love it.
I'm a spoiler for sure.
That's like a good idea, maybe. I'll take a nap.
My wake is littered with self-indulgent hedonists. Not necessarily a bad thing.
Well, they say if you want to know what sort of spiritual teacher you have, you should look at the disciples. So.
I can't tell if you just insulted Peter or gave him a
How can I know? What's the difference?
I think you're a compliment myself.
Yeah, really.
That's right. Exactly. You're the only one that got that.
But is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. Am I doing a good thing here? Am I doing a bad thing? I don't know. I'm just fucking around, you know. I'm just doing what I do. I don't know what it is. You know, there's no guarantees. This is an ongoing exploration and experimentation, improvisation. You know.
Works for me.
Cool.
Well, you know, the thing I've noticed is that the notion of work or lazy has nothing to do with ease. And when you're in ease, it's like the surfer who can ride the wave, whether it's high or it's low. There's never any concern about whether they stay up or fall in, because it's not about some result. It's about being at ease with being.
Sure, just being with this flow, just being in this flow, yeah, and it's absolutely effortless and spontaneous and easy, and yet it can be hyper-functional or not.
I like that because lazy is pretty pejorative, and I don't really feel that I'm like, it's a bad thing. It's just that I'm hanging out more and less.
Sure, but there's all of these consensus reality ways of qualifying things, which are complete fabrication, spin doctrine. It's good or bad. Laziness is bad. Application is good. Striving is good.
Right.
Settling is bad. I mean, all this mythology it's just total fabrication. It's total bullshit.
Yeah, the whole notion of work is more about second guessing and over planning, and I mean, granted, some things appear to need planning, but there's no need to struggle or overdoing it.
Sure.
Of doing the thing.
I mean, what's the biblical parable? Look at the lilies of the field; they toil not. Or I don't know what it is. I'm total misquote, I'm sure. But I mean, in alchemy, we started last night talking about alchemy, and alchemy. One of the catchphrases in alchemy is learn from nature, learn from what happens. Do animals work? Do animals struggle? Do animals train? It's an effortless. All life forms are just spontaneously doing their thing, being what they are. And there's are they lazy? Are they? All that qualification is an absurdity. They just are what they are in real time, spontaneously, and we are too. We're being done. It's already complete in the instant. And all of this second guessing and qualifying, it's good or it's bad, or I should strive to be this, or it's absurd. It's overthinking something that's already happening. It already is what it is, effortlessly and spontaneously. So why pretend to have to qualify it? It's redundant. It's an unnecessary redundancy. I feel like tonight's particularly incoherent. I like that. It's a good case study.
Animals go through a long, detailed learning process.
Certainly, as do we. But it's a spontaneous emergence as that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not contrived or imposed. It's life being life in real time.
Kittens playing is training to hunt.
Sure.
In fact, we're species that takes the longest time. Supposedly the most intelligent, it takes us 18 years, to survive in the world that we created.
That's pretty sad.
That's pretty amazing. Or at least to imagine that.
This actuality that is here, it doesn't need to be done. It's already completely doing itself comprehensively and inclusively. And everything whatsoever that occurs is it being what it is. and you being what you are and all of the complexity and conundrums of that are still just it being itself in real time, it being done objectively and inherently. So seeing this, I mean, I like this way of describing it as radiant. It's its own inherent positivity, activity is all activity, is all positivity, and is doing everything instantaneously in real time and spontaneously and inherently, including all of our second guessing it and psychologizing it and analyzing it and qualifying it and all of this is also always happening in real time by its nature. So there are no additions to it. It already comprehensively includes everything. And again, noticing this is very interesting because it's contradictory to the way we separate things out of, oh, there's objective events, and then there's what I'm doing, and then there's, we imagine all these different layers of participation as if they were somehow distinct from each other, and yet it's all just bang, it's all happening, just now in this spontaneous inherent arising, the spontaneous apparition of everything, in real time.
It's like last night, it's the idea of inclusivity, like just how big an idea that what that is, that's that. Absolutely nothing is left out.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Sure.
Even the things that you think, well, maybe this little part of myself does all those little things. We'll leave that out. No.
Yeah. Because where can it have come from? Right. What's it made of? Anything whatsoever that is present, what's made of? Where's it coming from? It's not everything comes from this, and then that over here is somehow little specialized, isolated things. Yeah. Everything, the presence of physical reality, the presence of experiential field, the presence of thought and analysis, the presence of all of this complexity of convoluted analysis, and all that, bang, it all comes with. It's all made of and generated in the same substance of the same energy, by the same impetus, the same, flash, the same radiance that shines forth. Inclusively.
I have a question, and I'm going to try to phrase this so it doesn't sound like a preference, even though it is.
You can't squeeze
I
out
know
that easy.
from experience, so it's kind of I'm not experiencing it too a little bit now, just a little bit, but full on you've mentioned before how that all physical reality is almost like a standing wave, like with the floor and the ceiling.
Sure.
It's all replenishing itself, all the time. So it's actually, rather than being the static, floor, ceiling, and window, it's all, it's disappearing and replenishing itself immediately.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can experience that, and most of the time I can't. And I'm curious, I guess the doorway for that one for access, rather than haphazard.
You're wondering what the doorway is?
Yeah, so it's not so
Tricks.
Yeah.
The tricks are real easy. The simplest one is notice how any extension of time and duration outside of the present moment is an imagined projection that happens in the present moment. And again, this can be subtle to see because we do it so consistently and so automatically.
Weird, because I was going into the object and like looking at it, so I believe it's the dots and eventually kind of.
Sure,
forms up.
that's the
You're
same
actually
thing.
Well, you're going more towards the flow of, the actual flow of experiential experience.
Well, it's the same thing. It's just the same. It's splitting hairs to say it's a this and a that.
Yeah.
But just look at any particular condition. What's its duration? And it's an easy way to see this is to watch motion. Watch the second hand of a clock. How long is it in any one position? It's in any one position for 0 time. So as soon as it goes to another position, it's in that position for 0 time. I mean, it's basically looking at the actuality of Zeno's paradox. You're familiar with Zeno's paradox? Zeno's paradox is fascinating because it's literally true. It sounds like a curious thought experiment that shows how weird thought is, but it's the other way around. Zeno's paradox proves that there is no space and time. That space and time are fantasies that are imagined in real time. Because instantaneous event is literally and absolutely instantaneous. Experience is instantaneous. Experience happens in the instant. Any particular character, like as I'm speaking, if you recorded my voice into an audio program and listened to shorter and shorter durations of the sound, it basically would sound more and more like a click. Anything. You can listen to any recorded sound and listen to, 1/100th of a second of that sound, and it'll sound like. And yet, that's the only thing that's happening. And yet it sounds like all of these words and all of this extension and all of that. And there's the echoes, there's the duration. So I make a sound, but then there's the ambient sound, which seems to come back later, which adds to the sense of temporal smearing, which is the sound, and then there's the echo, and the sound is in real time, and when it's not happening, it's nowhere, it doesn't exist. It only exists when it actually exists, which is just then. The echo seems to be a smearing, but it actually only exists just when it exists, even if it is an apparent lag time. So the way the whole thing works, the way it hangs together is very slippery. And it's again, this consistency of event is a fabrication, because get a camera, take a still picture. That's what's happening in an instant. And even that, no matter how fast your shutter speed, if you look very closely at that camera, if it had infinitely fine grain, you would notice the image is blurred. Because the only way to get a sharp image would be to have an instantaneous image, and it would be of nothing. So in real time, essentially nothing is happening.
You see, I've taken this Zeno's paradox in this kind of discussion, and it seems like that there's a possibility of tapping into that, but it can't be tracked. I mean, the mind cannot track this.
The mind cannot track it, but the mind doesn't need to track it because it's real, it's here. You can look at it again and again, and you are in fact looking at it, and you have the capacity to see it because you are it. You actually are in that mode, and even though it's irrational and inconceivable, you are that, so you can go there just as that.
I understand that intellectually. But really, it's definitely for me an altered state to be able to drop into that.
Sure. Yeah, it may seem to be an altered state, again, depending upon how habituated you are to a normalcy that seems to be other than that.
It's just a matter of thawing down the generality that would allow me to be that, to allow me to, you know what I mean? It's a thawing that has to have a sensitivity, thawing,
sure,
to see that aspect that's going on.
Sure, but again, it's developable. You can train in it. You can train in the sensitivity of being with that. I mean, that's what this is. That's what this is all about. Is training in sensitivity of being outside your normal modes. It's easy to be within your normal mode of, oh yeah, of course there's time and there's space and here it is and yeah, there's the passion. I mean, all that's fine, but to go out to contradict that and be with that outside of that frame of reference is effortful. It's a challenge at first. You have to, it can require a certain amount of training to it. I mean, and again, this depends upon one's nature and one's temperament. Some people could just maybe jump to that and go, oh yeah, okay, cool, yeah, I'm with that. And other people, it's like, wow, I can kind of see that, and then losing it. And that's fine. So the point is to work with it however it seems to be to you, but it is in fact always accessible to whatever degree it is, because it is in fact right here, right now, and you can play with it, you can poke at it, you can experiment with it.
I think that's just for me. I mean, when you say radiance or this, the shining of things, like think the appearance is shining.
Sure.
I mean, I have set that I intuit. I can intuit that, but the whole thing of things, I mean, as a positivity, the whole thing, like, it's sort of weird, like the disappearing of things.
Sure.
It's the same thing, but for some reason I'm a little bit in short circuit and be able to.
But, but again, there's lots, play with motion is the easiest way to do that. I mean, pick a particular point, watch something that's moving this way, and pick a particular point, like look at it, you look at the line in the background or something is moving across it, and like, it's not there, it's not there, it's not there, it's not there, it's there, and it's this, as soon as it's there, it's not there. There's no point where it's sort of there and it hangs out there for a while and then it moves on. It's arriving at a location, it's leaving that location. And it's literally true. This is not some mind trick. It's perceptibly true. It's completely obvious. And so watching motion and just feel that, explore it, explore the feeling, the direct, immediate perception of that actuality. And you can look at the way in which you're seeing it as a continuity, and yet in the instant, it's actually a completely nothing in particular. I mean, you want to do a thought experiment. Einstein's developed theory of relativity by doing a lot of thought experiments. He imagined he was on a photon and so on and so forth. Imagine you were looking at the present moment with absolutely no duration. You wouldn't see anything. Photons would be frozen. So there would be no light present. There might be a flash or two. So the closer you get to the present moment, the less event there is. And the present moment is essentially zero. And yet that zero presents us all of this through this bizarre smearing of averaging, nothing as everything. I mean, it doesn't make sense, obviously. You can't, you try and put it into words and it sounds like gibberish. But, you can look at this. You can find the way that it is actually like that. And the simplest way is to see that only the present moment exists. Even if you're not precise, even if you just say, okay, the present moment, and maybe it's, okay, let's say the present moment lasts a half a second. Okay, cool. Where is yesterday? Where are the events of yesterday? Where are the events of 1,000 years ago? Where are the events of the Big Bang? Where's the events of 2 seconds ago? Gone forever, non-existent. They're absolutely as non-existent as something that hasn't happened yet. But but that didn't happen. Something that hasn't happened yet might not happen. But that's just a concept. Something that it hasn't happened is non-existent. It's a concept, it's an idea in the present moment, because we're talking about it. But it only exists as a present moment idea that we're talking about. There is nothing that hasn't happened yet. There's only the idea that is happening, that of that supposedly, but there's no of that. The of that is a claim. The claim to be of that. There's no that for it to be of. And but if you look, the past is actually the same way. Oh, but no, I can tell we're in this room, so I can tell I walked in this room, and I remember walking in this room. Maybe, but I have the memory of walking in this room now, and there is no walking in this room. You can't find it. Where is it? It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist as much as if it had never happened. Which is not to say that it didn't happen, but I'm just pointing out how weird it is. That it's not just a simple mechanical, mechanistic, ongoing continuity the way we sort of stupidly think it is in a normal consensus worldview.
Yeah, it makes everything very pristine. As opposed
Yeah. Look at what's actually here. Look at what's actually present. I mean, presence is a huge phenomenon. Presence is amazing because it's completely palpable. Presence is undeniable. It's completely, you can't say what it is. You can't even find it. But there's nothing but presence. And presence is the very nature of now. The very nature of is presence. So, I mean, I like this. That's why I like this phrase, radiant presence. Presence is right here. It's completely self-justifying, self-verifying. It's just, there is presence, sure. I can't prove it. I can't even say what it is. I can't indicate, I can't point to it. But it's the given, it's the fact, is the fact of presence. And presence is now. Presence is always now. And so now and presence turn out to be one and the same thing. And that's very interesting because presence is actual. Now is actual. Actuality is nothing other than presence. Actuality is nothing other than nowness. Even though nowness and presence just sound like such abstractions, and yet they're not abstractions, they're absolute concrete. The only concrete that is findable, even though it's not findable in an indicative sense, in a definable sense, but it's completely self-evidently, self-verifyingly actual. Actuality itself is another synonym for presence. Reality is a synonym for presence. But reality sounds very grandiose and abstract, whereas presence is completely obvious and immediate. This is present, there's presence. And so, but presence again is obviously a synonym for now. And now is a synonym for actuality. So you have presence, now, actuality, reality, isness, all collapse into this that is here. And there's nothing else. There's no, okay, there's presence and then dot, dot, dot. There's no dot, 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 there's presence. And any dot, dot, dot has to be an aspect of presence. And so if the past is real, the past has to be an aspect of presence. And of course it turns out to be. Where do you find the past? Where do you look for the past? In presence. You look for the past in presence as memory, as a felt sense of continuum of trajectory of events and so on and so forth. But all of that still never departs from the present. So it's strange, it's interesting. It's not a simple extension of there's the past, the present, and the future, and they're all equally real. It's not like that, it's greater than that. Only the present is actual. Only the present is real. And the past and the future are strange and elusive aspects of the present, which has no duration. But that is another. Yeah, present doesn't even exist, which is, so it gets ruder and ruder and ruder.
This is weird too, because it's not even, it's not information. I mean, that's the weird thing about this.
No.
Take out it as information.
It's not information, but it is the soul, it's the soul actual information.
It's sort of, in some ways, it feels like it's the, it's the rattling of the rattling of the ladder of reality and trying to sort
That's
of
poetic.
find what's in the middle. Because there's nothing actually there, but there is a felt sense of activity and energy and whatever.
But all of this, you can say it's a thought experiment, but it's much more than that, or perhaps much less than that.
It's more like plugging in somehow.
Yeah, plug into what is real, what is actual. This is real. I mean, this here is, again, all synonyms, present, reality, now, all synonyms. It all just collapses. They're all just a very complex, circumlocucious way of saying, right?
Can you say it in dreams?
Well, dreams are nothing other than a saying of it as what we think of as dreams. Right? I mean, all the when a dream is a dream, it's a dream by virtue of presence of what we're qualifying as dream. So a dream is just a version of presence. And that a dream is by comparison to some otherness. Dream is a dream relative to a waking state. A dream in itself is nothing other than presence. It's not a dream in itself in the instant is not a dream. It's just this here now, right? It's only a dream as soon as we take it out in the extension of comparison of, this is the waking world, and so that's a dream, and that's different. I can fly there, and I'm not flying here, and so on and so forth. So all of that extension creates a difference. But in the instant of the dream, dreams aren't dreams in the moment. Dreams are just this here now, which is why they're so seductive to fall into it, right, as an objective reality. Because it is actuality in the present moment, just in no more or less than waking condition is, and so on. I mean, again, it's very slippery and elusive the way that is so. They are obviously differentiable, and the way that is so is very strange and elusive, because in actuality it's the same thing, but continually we find the same thing looking at this strange condition. It is so infinitely differentiated from itself, so infinitely qualifiable in all of its different modes, and yet they all are exactly the same thing. They all are this instantaneous presence, this radiant presence, this soul condition that seems to be so diversified and so absolutely different in itself, but it never departs from being exactly what it is, always. And the way in which that's so is completely irrational. It makes absolutely no sense. Can't get a handle on it.
I mean, there is a real alchemy in what you're saying in terms of that it's very precise and huge amount of energy that's generated when all of that comes together without any duration.
Sure. The point event, the instantaneous now of reality, of actuality, is all power, is all potency, is literally everything.
It is the philosopher's stone. It is the
all of that. Literally, it is that.
There's nothing else.
Yeah.
Instance is a really bad word, just because.
Which isn't?
Instant is a bad word, just because it seems like
a little part of something.
Exactly. It's like it's a something, and it's like well, there's instant and no.
Well, all words are bad words because they're juxtaposed with other words from which they seem to be differentiable. Which of course is not the case in reality. Reality presents as infinitely differentiated from itself, but it never actually other than exactly what it is. I mean, it's very strange. It's very, very strange phenomenon. It is precisely itself, and yet it presents as absolute, infinitely differentiated in every dimension. How can that happen? Nobody knows. But it's self-evident. And it's mirroring of all creation and all color and all value and all meaningfulness and all flavor is actually just one single absolute unity, perhaps non-unity of actuality. Just this instantaneous flash.
It's like a transcendental ripple.
Yeah, sure, whatever. I mean, there's all these wonderful, elaborate ways of seeing it. All the poetry, all the mathematical formulas of physics, all of these gorgeous ways of looking at it, none of which actually precisely capture it, but they all express it in various degrees of richness and interest.
So that they're all expressing it after the fact, really.
Essentially, sure.
Because the only thing that can express it is it itself.
Yeah, exactly so. Yeah. That's why there's no point trying to abstract it. There's no point trying to define it or indicate it or capture it.
You're already late to that party.
Yeah. And yet it's always right here, so it's always available. And anything you do that is that will be it. So it comes with too.
You can't be late to the party when you are at the party.
I am the party. I joke about that when we're going to these satsangs and stuff, and I say, we're literally like, we're late. I'll let them start without me.
So another way of saying that it is itting.
It is itting, yeah. I mean, I was having a comedic conversation with a friend once, and I said, there's really only two words in language, and all words actually collapse to these two words. And then only the sole noun is it, and the sole verb is. So anytime you say any complex sentence, all you're really saying is it is, it is, it is, it is, it is, it is. You know, but it was kind of a fun day today. It was sort of pretty at. But that really translates into is it is, it is, it is, it is. Because if you're looking for what does pretty mean, where are you going to look? And at it, which is. When you look for today, where are you going to look? At it, which is. So all of these elaborations collapse down to this presence, this actuality. Which even though it presents us all of this infinite differentiation, it never departs from itself. It's always exactly what it is. You know, it's very strange, it's a very irrational condition. It's infinitely smeared and not smeared at all.
You're taking drugs at the time.
What?
I do have a history of mental illness, I should let you know. As a disclaimer.
Now you tell us.
You should have put that on.
Yeah.
Mental illness and drug use, okay? Is that a good thing? Is that a selling point or?
Let's just say it is.
It is, right?
It's a new kind of ice cream.
It is ice cream.
You could be sued.
That would make a good brand name. It is.
There's an ice cream called It's It.
So that must be it.
Well, I violate the copyright and it'd sue your ass.
Yeah.
We could countersue for them not being truthful.
Well, this has been good. I've been enjoying tonight's session. I hope you've found it.
I have no idea.
Well, me neither. I'm just saying that.
Just graduate.
What did we talk about?
I mean, it's like they say about the 60s. If you had a good time, you don't know what
No,
happened.
if you remember, you weren't there.
Okay. See, I got it wrong.
That's okay. That means you were actually there.
It's all a big blur somehow.
Well, it is sort of interesting as they try to reconstruct the history of the 60s now, having retrospective.
Well, all history is like that. I mean, you know, this history is this ongoing revisionism of, you know, in Roman times, what was really going on was this, or this, you know, what's happening. And it's like, yeah, right. You know, right. Sell your book and let someone else do theirs, you know. You know, but at the end of the day, what remains is, this is real. This that is here is real. This is actual. This is actuality. And it's cool that it's as interesting as it is. It's very cool that it is as slippery and astounding as it is. You know, and it turns out to be powerfully cool that it is that way, because again, being with it as it actually is, as opposed to being with it more dully in sort of the way, the modes that normally people are with this, has some delightful perks of beauty and joy and freedom and vitality. Why don't we knock off on that note, on that glorious, resounding finishing note, And I'll wish you a good evening and hope you sleep well. There will be, I will be here at 9 o'clock tomorrow again for sitting, whatever. I'm calling it that. And we'll see what happens. So anyway, please enjoy, I hope, and have a good night.
Thank you.